When you start a new project, typically you need things like a domain name, hosting, things like that. When I choose hosting, I pick mine for the options it gives. I like to know what I'm getting and set things up just how I like them. This is why for your projects, you should check out Linode. Linode servers feature native SSD storage, a 40 gigabyte network, and Intel E5 processors. That's all the power you need to run VMs under full control, or Docker containers, who doesn't love that, encrypted disks, and VPNs. Plus, they have 10 data centers across the world and add-ons like backups, Node Balancer, and Longview to help you control your server costs. They also offer block storage for your static files, and you can get started with a $20 credit if you use the code JavaScriptJabber2018. That credit is good for 4 months on their 1 gigabyte server. That's a lot of time to try them out and see if they're the right fit for you. That code again is JavaScriptJabber2018. Also, if you're interested in working for Linode, they're hiring. Head to linode.com/careers to see their available positions. Hey, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Adventures in Angular. This week, it looks like I'm the only panelist.
Yay!
I think there was just some confusion. We did an episode earlier about ngGirls, and I think folks showed up for that one and then thought they were done, and that was probably a miscommunication on my part. But anyway, Sam Julien is here, and he's going to talk to us about upgrading Angularjs. Sam, do you want to say hi and introduce yourself?
Yeah. Hey, Chuck. I'm really happy to be here. Thanks for having me. I am a Angular teacher and developer in Portland, Oregon, and have spent a lot of time working through the issues with ngUpgrade and launched a comprehensive course called Upgrading Angularjs. And so I'm thrilled to be here to talk about ngUpgrade in the real world, the kind of problems that companies face on a regular basis. Yeah.
Right. And I'm curious, do you see a steady traffic still of people who are using AngularJS and need that upgrade path, or have people pretty much moved on at this point?
Oh, no, we still get a lot of traffic because there are a lot of what I would call workhorse companies out there, companies like financial companies, health companies that have a lot of legacy AngularJS code that they're kind of stuck with. Most of these are, I would say, medium to large applications, so not huge applications, but they're with a pretty small team, usually 10, 20, maybe even less than that people. And so, as you know, AngularJS sort of spread like wildfire among these companies in the enterprise space. And so there's actually quite a few out there around the country and even the world that are trying to figure out what to do about moving away from AngularJS and going to Angular.
Gotcha. And I know that there are docs out there on how to upgrade. So, that the Angular team has put out. So since you've got this course on how to do it, I'm curious, where do you feel like the shortfall is in that documentation?
Yeah, so the Angular team has done a great job with the docs, but there are a couple of things, especially in the beginning of the official documentation, that throw people off. So in the beginning of the documentation, it has these few steps that are like, get your app aligned with the style guide, use a bundler, and use TypeScript. And even Frosty actually mentioned this in the November episode on ngUpgrade, that it's sort of like, okay, well, how do I do all that? And obviously the Angular docs can't go into extensive documentation on setting up Webpack and all that kind of thing, but that's a big pitfall for a lot of people who are sitting here with an AngularJS app that maybe it uses script tags, maybe it uses gulp or grunt like a task runner, and they're going, I don't have any idea how to go from this to an Angular application that's using TypeScript and ES6 modules and all of that.
Right. So what do you tell those people? They get lost, they get frustrated, they come to you thinking, okay, well, he's got a course, he knows how to tell me how to do this. So how do people actually get started? How do they take that first step to get in line with the style guide and move over to the bundler module kind of setup that we're talking about here?
So it's it's an iterative process that you can do, and the approach depends a lot on what your current application state is. The things that are the most critical are getting in line with in the John Papa style guide, getting in line with having one item per file and arranging your application by feature instead of by type. Back in the old days, we would do things like have folders called controllers or directives. So we want to get that set up, and then updating to a current version of AngularJS, meaning at least 1.5, where you can use component architecture. So those are sort of the foundations, and using something like npm or yarn as your package manager. There's no more Bower, and so those are sort of the building blocks. And then from there, that's when you can start looking at shifting your application to the correct architecture with components, and then also starting to implement TypeScript and Webpack.
Gotcha. And it sounds like when you look into ngUpgrade that you can do all of these different things in parallel with each other, or, with your old app and your new app. Is that really the case, or do you really have to take these steps one at a time?
The only thing that is, you can do a lot of it iteratively. Once you have the foundation laid, you can move over gradually. The only thing that is really critical is getting the Webpack and TypeScript build process set up, because Angular 5 Plus is going to need TypeScript and bundling. And so once you have that set up, some of the architecture, you don't have to get it all looking perfect before you start adding ngUpgrade and Angular. It's ideal if it's like that, but if you're working with a big code base, you can't always get there. So the most important thing is to be using npm and to get a Webpack and TypeScript build process set up, to where then you can have your Angular and your AngularJS legacy code running alongside of each other. And then you can gradually upgrade or downgrade pieces of that application to Angular.
Gotcha. So let's back up a little bit. And why don't you just kind of walk through the process overall that you tell people to go through?
I break it down basically to 4 building blocks. Where, so there's 2 phases. We have the preparation phase and then the upgrade phase. And the preparation phase is what breaks down into the sort of the 4 building blocks that I started to mention earlier, where you've got your files, your dependencies, your app architecture, and your build process. And those are the 4 that the order and sequence and how deep you go into them depends a lot on your starting point in your application. And like I said, the build process and the TypeScript is the most critical one before you start the longer process of moving the application over to Angular. And in the migration phase, you also have a few different pieces to that puzzle. First, you have to install all of your new Angular and ngUpgrade dependencies and bootstrap the application. You have to change the way you bootstrap. You instead of back in AngularJS, we added ngapp to our index.html file. We remove that and do a manual bootstrapping through Angular 2 Plus, Angular 5, where we're loading both Angular and AngularJS into the browser. So once that's done, then it's a matter of determining your approach of how you're going to work through upgrading your application. And when you're doing that, there's a couple different approaches that people have mentioned. Victor Savkin has a couple great different approaches. Asim Hussain has a great approach. I found for this particular group of people that picking a route and then kind of working from the bottom up makes a lot of sense, where you're going from a piece of a route that has, let's say, a service that's used by a lot of components. So you'll take that service, rewrite it to Angular 5, and then make it available to your AngularJS components using ngUpgrade. And so that part, you basically just crunch through that, and that can take as long as you need it to over time before you've got your application moved over. Then you would save your routing to the end and move over your routing over to the Angular router at the end. And then somewhere along there, you also have to make sure your application is set up for production. So that's another area that can get really frustrating for folks out there in these workhorse companies where they're going, okay, well, all this is great, but I have to have an application that I can deploy to production at any given time. I can't just take 3 or 4 months off and move this application over. And so that's a huge sticking point for people. And so that's one thing that I really delved a lot into is, okay, how do I take this application that's a hybrid of Angular and AngularJS and deploy it to production? And the key there is Angular's AOT mode. It's ahead of time compilation mode. So we have to set up the application for being able to deploy to both to be able to develop our application locally, but also deploy it to a production environment. Right. And to do that, we'll set up Webpack and some other bits of the application, like some TypeScript config, to be able to do AOT compiling. And you can do that at any point in the upgrade process.
Gotcha. It really feels like a lot of stuff you have to do. I mean, it's not just this flip a switch. It's almost like a migration to a new system.
It is, honestly. So where all this came from, I probably should have backed up and said this earlier on, but I was faced with doing this. And this was about a year and a half ago. And I actually, I showed up to ngConf last year very frustrated, very upset, because all I was hearing prior to ngConf was, we have this new version of Angular. It's really awesome. There's all these great things you can do. You can use this CLI. It's fantastic. And I'm over here in sort of the real world with a big AngularJS application where I'm going, and it's got a gulp build, and it's fairly complex. And we're like, okay, that's all great, but how do I actually implement this in the real world? Because it's a big deal. It's a big process. And so I talked to everybody who would listen to me at ngConf. I had a long talk with Rob Wormold outside of one of the conference rooms where he's like, bless his heart. So basically what I decided to do was just channel all of my frustration into figuring this process out for people.
Right.
And it is a big process, but it's surprisingly not that complicated once you know what the process is. The ngUpgrade library is actually really straightforward and really easy to use. And for that reason, it is a lot easier to go from AngularJS to Angular than it is to go to React or to go to Vue, because you're not going to a different ecosystem. There's no bridge library between AngularJS and React like ngUpgrade. So it is a big, overwhelming thing to figure out. But once you've got the steps laid out, it is a manageable process. It's something that you can do alongside of your feature development. You can take as long as you need. At NG Atlanta, I was talking to several people who have said that this has been a process that they've staged out over a long period of time, and that is helpful when you have to also do feature development at the same time as your bug fixes and your technical debt.
Yeah, I have a few friends that work for a company here in Salt Lake, and there were some pretty major changes between, I think, they're all Ruby developers, but between Rails 3 and Rails 4 or something, I don't remember. But anyway, it was the same kind of thing, and it took them 2 years or something to get the entire thing upgraded. And if you have a reasonably complicated app, I think that's a reasonable expectation that that's what it's going to take.
Right, exactly. That's the time frame that several of the folks at NG Atlanta and in my own experience, it's sort of that timeline. But the good news is that when you're, when you've got a process, it's okay for it to. We hear that time frame of like 2 years, and we're like, oh my gosh, that's a huge time to rewrite. But I mean, it is pretty reasonable, and when you've got something that you can move gradually and deploy it to production when you need to without breaking a bunch of things, that's really the important part. And so that's sort of the knowledge that I want to get out to the world, because I want to help these all the people like me. I basically just made the resource that I wish existed when I was trying to do this myself. So
yeah.
So it's good though. I mean, and the other part of it, and I sort of glossed over it, was part of what makes this so daunting, but at the same time reasonable, is you can't always use the CLI for these projects. We all love the CLI, but when you're in an ngUpgrade project that didn't start with the CLI, where you're moving an AngularJS application over, you often can't just use the CLI, because the CLI initializes a new Git repository, and it's highly opinionated, obviously for good reason, but it's highly opinionated on how you structure your application. And so I think that knowledge gap of having to hand roll your Webpack and TypeScript, that's a huge sticking point I'm finding for a lot of my students and for a lot of developers out there. And that's another thing that I tried really hard to zero in on, and not just kind of hand wave over the details. It was like, okay, how do I set up Webpack on my own to where I can use both frameworks, and I can use AOT compilation and all of that, because we just don't have the luxury of using the CLI in these situations, unfortunately.
Right. Yeah, I mean, it would be really convenient if you could just CLI your way into it, but
it'd be wonderful. Yeah, I mean, because that's a great. I don't know if maybe in the future with the schematics or something, if that'll sort of there'll be a path to make it an easier thing. The biggest problem in my experience with it is there used to be a while back, there was an ng init that let you create a new CLI project within an existing repository, and they had to do away with that for various reasons. And so that's sort of the biggest hurdle is, we've got these big old repositories with lots of history that it really doesn't make sense to have to make a new repository and move everything over. So that's part of the issue of having to hand roll everything yourself.
Yeah, I can see that. I can also just see though that, I mean, everything's so different. It just doesn't, I don't know if you can. And I know I just rambled and said a whole bunch of but I'm just trying to think through the ramifications of this. And yeah, I mean, everybody has something that's just a little bit different. And so, I mean, what are you going to do?
Right. I mean, if your app is small enough to just rewrite it, then you can just use the CLI, make a new new repository, make a new application, and start from scratch. But
it's my contention though that those people have already moved over.
Yeah, I mean, they probably have. And that's why my kind of target of who I'm trying to help are the people who feel stuck, who are caught in the middle of, well, all that stuff would be nice, but I can't just rewrite. I have a bigger application that I have to move over slowly,
Yeah. So what are the biggest problems that you're seeing then? I mean, is it the adoption of things like TypeScript and switching the build system over, or is it other areas?
I think a lot of it is the setup. It's dealing with moving to Webpack. TypeScript in and of itself isn't a huge problem, except it's sort of like going to the dentist for your old code, where once you switch over to TypeScript, it's going to point out a lot of problems. And so depending on what your code style is, that could throw you off. I know in my experience, I mean, it's ultimately a good thing because it's showing you where you're not defining things or where you're using deprecated methods or things like that. But it will take some time. It'll slow things down. To once you switch over to TypeScript and you're using the compiler, you're going to run into things that you haven't even thought about in a year because you're using this old date method in JavaScript that you forgot about, and TypeScript now refuses to compile it, and so you do have to take some allotment of that, because I'm finding that the actual upgrade with ngUpgrade, where you're rewriting a component or a service to Angular and then downgrading it to make it available to Angularjs, is fairly straightforward. I mean, there's a little bit of a learning curve especially with forms. You've got to make some changes in the way you think about forms and things like that. But even with moving to things like observables, you at least have the option of using promises, or you don't have to move all at once. So the sticking point ends up being the setup, getting it working on your build server, all of that. And then once that's in place, that's sort of the hardest part, is getting to a point where you're working with clean AngularJS code and you're able to have a nice build process.
Yep. So have you seen many teams get all the way through this process to the point where they're not using ngUpgrade anymore to run anything, and they're running everything with Angular 2, 4, 5, 6? So
far, I haven't seen many. I've seen some who have gotten all the way through. So far, it seems like in my experience, everybody is in that middle step of just gradually. Actually, there are a couple people I can think of that have gotten all the way through it, that I talked to at NG Atlanta. But I would say right now, since we're still sort of in the early days of this process being hammered out, people are still in that process of upgrading all of their components and services. But we'll get there. I bet you a year from now, a lot more people will have finished this process.
What do you tell people in the meantime? Just stay the course?
Yeah, I mean, to some extent, you gotta. I mean, it really, you're in control of how long the process takes. It's up to your team and your development cycle to figure out how quickly you can move things. And as we all know, the things that we think are going to take a long time often take no time, and things that we think are going to take no time take a long time. So I just had that experience recently where I was trying to move a form over, and I thought, oh, this will be a piece of cake. And it took me way longer than I thought to move it, because I was just running into a lot of the nitty gritty details. But, that's on me,
Yep. Are you ready to master Angular? Oasis Digital offers Angular Bootcamp, a 3-day intense workshop class for individuals or teams. They cover Angular 4 and 2 and focus on the skills and knowledge you need for complex, data-rich applications. They also still offer Angularjs for teams supporting older projects. Bring them to your site or send developers to them in St. Louis, San Francisco, New York, DC, and other cities, and online at angularbootcamp.com. So is this process going to get any easier? Because it sounds like they kind of have plans to sunset AngularJS, or at least a lot of the support for it, over the next year or so. And I don't know. I'm worried that as they move toward not maintaining AngularJS, that they start moving toward not worrying so much about the upgrades either.
Well, the only thing so far, what I'm seeing is the more people do this, the more little tools come out. People who are writing scripts or automated tools with TypeScript to help alleviate that. I also think that the more people are working on build process shortcuts and things like that, I don't think the official support from Google is going to change much. The ngUpgrade library is pretty solid, and once AngularJS is at 1.7, it'll go into that LTS support for a few years. But I think the community will keep trying to make it a little bit easier every time. I mean, through new open source tools and resources and things like that.
Yep.
I also look at some of this as, let's fast forward.
John.
It's John Papa. First of all, you're my hero. It's an honor to talk to you.
It's an honor to talk to you. Sorry, I'm late. But I think this is interesting because fast forward 2-3 years when, supposedly we got 3+ years of AngularJS support, active support. Now it's 2021 in April. And I'm looking at my project thinking, gee, I've got this Angular 1.5 project. Maybe it's not even 1.7. And I want to continue using it, and I want to use ngUpgrade. At that point, though, I'm also looking going, has my project been around for 5, 6, 7, 8 years? And do I really want to keep using ngUpgrade, or do I want to, at that point, look at it and go, my app is 7 years old. This is really the time to think about a refresh, because a 7-year-old app on the web, that's a business case to me to go to your leaders and go, yeah, we can continue doing this. And maybe we have to because of financial reasons, but we should really start planning for some kind of by 2021, I would say that's the time to think and plan now to say we need to upgrade this thing to Angular 6, 8, 10, whatever we're at. Don't you think?
Oh, yeah. I think that's a great point, John. I think that we're sort of in this sweet spot right now of if you start this process now, by the end of the LTS process, hopefully you'll be long converted over, so that maybe this whole ngUpgrade process in and of itself will sunset in a few years, where I think you're right. In 2021, starting an ngUpgrade process might be a bad idea. You should probably start it now, or in 2021, you might just start the rewrite.
Yeah, a little bit of foresight now. We know there's a little more than 3 years. I think it's June or July. It's when the LTS kicks in, if my memory recalls.
Yeah.
We know there's 3+ years. This is great timing to start planting the seed with your leaders to say, hey, we're not doing this now. I totally get it. But let's think about this. This is when it expires. We need to plan for this down the road for whenever the next, maybe work out with the business leaders and go, for the next major app addition that you're going to do or enhancement, let's figure out how we, re-architect this thing. Because guess what? Node will change by then too, and so will the entire web.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, that's sort of the approach that I'm taking is getting these applications set up with ngUpgrade and the build process and all of that. And so that way the feature development, the new features, we can start in Angular 5, and while we're, when we have time for technical debt, we can gradually move over the rest of the AngularJS code to Angular. That's what ngUpgrade sort of allows you to do. But meanwhile, the feature development we can do in Angular 5. And that seems to be a good approach right now.
I agree with you 100% there. It's and by no means am I trying to tell people, look, you shouldn't be doing upgrade. I think it's fantastic. We should be doing this. But I like to always look at myself down the road and think of myself from a leadership standpoint. Do I want to be told by my developers, hey, guess what? This thing's being sunsetted in a month. We need to get off it now, when there's no time and there's no money.
Right.
Having 3 years of somebody dripping on you going, hey, in 3 years, we're going to need this. Oh, it's 2.5 years, we're going to need this. Eventually that'll sink in, right? And just trying to look at it from the other perspective.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Totally. Yeah, I guess it depends a lot on what the long-term outcome is, whether you start the process now or whether you wait for 3 years and do a complete rewrite. It depends on your capacity and your outlook for those few years.
I've been through enough complete rewrites to where if there's another path that allows me to keep working the way that I'm working and slowly make the upgrade, I'm going to pick that. So
yeah, that's been my experience too. But that's just, with my team. Yeah, I think we've had an easier time with doing a gradual rewrite rather than having to pitch a complete rewrite at any time, because the rewrite, man, that's the hardest type of technical debt to sell the business on. It's basically like, hey, we're going to totally change this application. and you won't really see any difference, but I promise it's faster and better. It's tough. I mean, even though we as developers understand that it's going to be so much better and easier to maintain and all of that, it's a tough conversation to have with the business.
Yeah, there's another group of people too. So working at a large enterprise for the last 5 or 6 years, one thing I noticed is there are the big apps, the ones that get talked about a lot, that have got hundreds of screens or thousands of components, and they're huge, and you really got to work performance and all this. But then there's a couple of those, and then there's like literally I had dozens and almost hundreds of these tiny apps that literally had like 3 screens.
Mm-hmm.
And for those, people were asking me, they're like, "Hey, should we use ngUpgrade or not?" I'm like, well, how long did it take you to develop just the UI portions? Forget the APIs, right? Because those won't change. How long did it take you to build just the Angular part? Like, 3 to 4 weeks, and it was just one developer. Or in some cases, it was a week. In that case, I'm like, don't ngUpgrade, just rewrite it. It's 3 screens.
Yeah.
Be done with it.
Right.
So there's a balance, right?
Totally. Yeah, there's definitely a sweet spot for ngUpgrade of sort of a moderately complicated app being worked on by a small team, sort of a medium to large application that you can't just rewrite in a couple of weeks, but then, you don't have enough people to do this huge distributed rewrite. Yeah.
So I've got an interesting question for you too. Sorry, Charles, mind if I ask real quick?
Go ahead.
Thanks. So I've got an interesting question for you, Sam. I was at a conference last week, and this is not a rare occurrence. I had a gentleman say to me, "Hey, I just took your Angular workshop that you and Dan Wallin did. Really enjoyed it, but I can't use any of this because I'm on Angular.js and we have a really large project. Do you recommend that we just switch to React or Vue, or, what do you, like, they go off in this direction of, if I really have to rewrite it, what should I do?" And I'll ask them, well, have you thought about using ngUpgrade so you could start using the new features of Angular, but still keep your existing app in Angular.js? And here's the kicker. A lot of them are like, what is that? So I think there's a publicity problem too. Do you see that only the people on Twitter and who follow the Angular blog know about this, or listen to our podcast, or how do you let other people know? How do we get the word out?
That's great, John. That's exactly, since I have a foot in the C# world and a foot in the Angular world, that's a big part of why I made my course and why I'm out talking about it. Like, I was on MS Dev Show recently because there's a huge part of the .NET world that is using AngularJS. So, I think there is a publicity problem because we get that for the course. My team and I get asked that a lot. Should we just switch to React, and then not even knowing what ngUpgrade is? And so I think that's a big part of it, is getting the word out that ngUpgrade exists, and that unless you've got a team full of React developers, there's no way it's going to be easier to rewrite to React. If that's your team's expertise, then yeah, it will be. But if you're a group of Angular developers who have been doing AngularJS, ngUpgrade is going to bridge that. You're not having to relearn a whole new ecosystem. That's not to say that it's a walk in the park and you're not going to have any pitfalls with trying to learn some new concepts, but it's definitely designed to bridge that gap for you. So yeah, I totally agree with you, John. That's a great point.
I think, though, that this question that John asked highlights something for me, because I go to the conferences, I listen to this show and a couple of other shows on Angular or JavaScript or things like that. And so when John said there are some people out there that just haven't ever heard of ngUpgrade, I'm going, well, how? But the difference is I'm talking to people who know about it, so the circle I'm moving in is talking about it, and the circles they're moving in aren't, because they're not listening to the podcast or going to the conferences or, whatever those steps are that would take them to the place where it's like, hey, you can keep working on things and maintaining the code that you have while you build new features in the new stuff, and then eventually upgrade things as you get a chance. So how do we get the word out then? We're doing shows like this, but clearly not everybody is listening to them. They're doing conference talks on them, but clearly not everybody is watching the conference talks, even though they're on YouTube for free. So how do we inform more people and make it clear, hey, look, there's a real path for this?
I think a lot of that comes to people like Sam who are out there in multiple communities. Because, like, when I go to .NET shows, because that's where my history's from, even though I haven't done a lot of .NET in the last 6-7 years, I talk to these folks, and a lot of times, not everybody, but a lot of the people at these .NET conferences, even they'll get to go to one conference a year, and they'll choose a .NET related one because that's their core competency. And Angular just happens to be something else that they do. It's not their core, right? They're very good at Angular, but they think of themselves more as C# or ASP.NET developers. And then Angular's, I'm not going to say it's an afterthought because it's not, because they're deeply skilled at it, but they're not at ngConf. They're not at Angular Connect. They're not following the podcast or the Twitter channels. So I think we have to find ways to get people like Sam, who have their feet in multiple pools, to say, this is a great thing we got to bring to these other communities and do that. And that's why I'm excited that folks like you exist.
Well, thanks. Yeah, I mean that's the group that I'm really passionate about helping, is because that's sort of, there seems to be an ever widening gap between the folks in the know and the folks who are kind of just with their head down, working, who don't get the opportunity to watch a lot of conference talks. I'm really lucky that I get to get out there, and I kind of lived on that edge of, getting the opportunity to go to ngConf and to talk to people like Rob Wormold and learn this stuff. And so I'm trying to, through different mediums like Reddit or, other things like that, get out to sort of the average person. The only thing I'll add is that another great way to do this is your local meetup. Not that I'm biased as the co-organizer of Angular Portland, but local meetups are a really great way to spread the word on this. And we're always hurting for good speakers at local meetups. So a great thing you can do is find your local meetup. Most cities have one. If you don't have one, you can start one and get in touch with me, and I'll direct you to other people who can help you. And you can find the Angular developers in your city and give a talk on ngUpgrade, or your experiences, because that to me has been a really effective way. There are people in our meetup who never go to, they don't spend their time watching conference talks and, going to events and things like that. But, they're looking for immediate, easily accessible information that's helpful to them, to their work, to their daily life. And a local meetup is a really low barrier to entry, low cost. They can just show up and watch a talk. So I would highly recommend getting involved with that. And there's a great Maxime who does, I think NG Vikings started NG Community. That is a Slack for meetup organizers. So it's easier more than ever to get involved with a local meetup. And we would love to see those all over the world.
Yeah,
that's a great point.
I've harped on this before. I will say it again. A lot of people say I'm not in a major tech hub and I can't find a meetup. And almost all of those people that I wind up talking to, I'll sit down with them. I'll go on meetup.com and we find one in their area. So go look, because, yes, it's not in every area, but you might be surprised at what you can find that's within a 20-minute drive of where you live or work.
Yeah.
Yeah, I almost wish that there's so many, oh my gosh, there's so many communication channels. There's Slack and there's the Jabber stuff and there's Discourse and all these different places that we can talk, Gitter channels. On some of these, I always go back to like the Angular IO docs. That's a great place to start to get some information. But when you get stuck, that's like the big problem, because a lot of people, even these developers who don't get out to conferences as much or follow Twitter, they'll do a Google search for the most part, and they'll look for something and the docs will come up. But I wonder if there's a next step. Like if there's some way to say, hey, did this doc help you? And if not, you need that extra step. Click here, and there's a whole community of people who are willing to help you with this topic. I know like Gitter is pretty popular. I don't personally use it a lot, but I know like there's a Gitter channel for the Angular repo that people talk on. But is there any online community, Sam, that you can recommend where people who are struggling with ngUpgrade can reach out to people like you?
Well, the thing that has helped me a lot historically is a group called Angular Buddies. Now, it's it's now by invitation because it's just a volunteer run community that nobody pays for it. So nobody has the money. Nobody has like the commercial Slack. But I wonder if we could somehow get a bigger version of that. Because a few years ago, back when Angular Buddies was open, it was a really wonderful place. That's how I met Rob Warmold like 3 or 4 years ago, before he was even working for Google. And that has proven really helpful. So I don't know if there's it got so big that they had to close it, but stuff like those Slack communities are great. I think the more of those we can have, or maybe like a regional or more monolithic Angular Slack or something, that would be awesome. Because I run into that too, because I don't have someone real close, that I have mentors who are C# developers that are more senior than me, but I get stuck on Angular things and I have to turn to someone in the virtual community instead of like a coworker or something.
Yeah, and I feel like Stack Overflow, I'm going to say this and maybe regret it right away, but I feel like Stack Overflow is not the place for this anymore.
No.
I've kind of soured on using Stack Overflow for this kind of stuff lately.
Well, the thing so Stack Overflow, if it's something that's easily searchable, so you have an error code, or you have a certain bit of code that you're looking for, or how do I blah blah blah, that's fine. But if you run into something that really hangs you up, a lot of times that's harder to find on a forum like Stack Overflow.
Yeah.
And it's much easier to go somewhere where there's a real life person who you can say, hey, I've got this problem, here's what's happening to me, and they can immediately, in context, ask you the right questions to get you to the right place. And so, you may be characterizing it wrong. You might be saying controller instead of component or something like that. And just that.
And the worst part about Stack Overflow is somebody can shame you pretty easily too. Like, you said controller, not component. Go get yourself straight before you ask a question. What's wrong with you? And
totally.
I feel like the shaming on Stack Overflow is so high that it's deterring people from using it for other purposes. Like, you can downvote questions, right?
Yeah.
So let's say I go up there and say, hey, I'm struggling with this with ngUpgrade. I'm not really sure where to go from here. That's not a discrete question, and somebody might downvote the heck out of it and close it. And, but that's useful. It's like, wait a minute, here's my app. There's a Stack link to it. I've got this problem. Can somebody point me in the right direction? Boy, it would be really nice if somebody helped,
Yeah, it's true. There's definitely a gap there with Stack Overflow and even Reddit, where it's hard to get that positive kind of compassionate communication that you can get with a one-on-one mentor, or with even in the chat, a chat environment. You can moderate that a little bit better. And while we're talking about Googling, real talk, one of the biggest problems with ngUpgrade that people find is Googling for answers right now, because the change from Angular 1 to AngularJS and Angular 2 to Angular has caused all kinds of problems with that. And so I think this is now more than ever extremely important that we try to form communities around this, because Googling for answers now when you're working in both AngularJS and Angular is well nigh impossible. And it's become extremely difficult to find answers. And it's a continual frustration for people, because they search for Angular form validation, and there's stuff from Angular 1.2, there's stuff from Angular 5, and everywhere in between, and it's just a nightmare. I mean, just real talk, like, it's a nightmare, So we got to find ways of building communities of kind, helpful people that can.
I usually exclude anything that's over 2 years old for that exact reason. I was eliminating like Angular.js, but I stopped doing that, and now when I do my Google searches, I do anything in the last 2 years, because if it's from 2013 on Angular, no, I don't want to know.
True. Yeah. I mean, that's a good tip.
I'm really kind of inspired to see if there's some way to pull the community like this together. Another aspect of the coding meetups that I would also like to foster is something like a live walkthrough demo workshop, something every month that people.
How about Twitch?
Yeah, Twitch is a good thing too. You've been doing some Twitch.
Maybe we can inspire Sam to start a Twitch channel and where he does ngUpgrades once a month. What do you think?
I mean,
right, put you on the spot.
I mean, I've thought about that. Yeah, that's a good idea. I mean,
I'll tell you what, if you do that, I will tweet the heck out of it, and I'll even cross promote it on my Twitch stream. So.
Oh wow. Okay. Well, then I better do it. If John Papa's gonna help me.
Yeah.
Everyone's gonna get live help from Sam doing ngUpgrades. Hey, why not?
I mean, yeah, it's a great idea. I've thought about that myself. Actually, because of people like you who've been doing Twitch, as well as like Suze Hinton. I think you know her because of Microsoft.
Yep, we work together. Yep,
she's awesome. She's one of my IoT heroes, and she's obviously very well known now for her Twitch streams on hardware and things like that. So yeah.
Cool.
Awesome.
And all kidding aside, if you do it, great. I will help you with that. If you don't, I was half jokingly pushing you there, so I don't want to pressure you in any way.
No, I really appreciate it. It's something that I've been thinking about doing, so now I think I should just do it.
Yes, Sam, give in to peer pressure.
Peer pressure.
All right. Well, before we get to picks, I do want to give you a chance to plug your course, just because if there's a walkthrough out there, I find that is really, really helpful. And I also find that if you go and buy a course, at least for me, like I don't mind asking for help, but if I paid for something like a course, then I really don't mind asking for help because I sent the money. So if people want to get your help on upgrading or getting started with upgrading, Sam, where do they go to get your course?
Yeah, it's upgradingangularjs.com, and we've got a bunch of stuff for you there. I've got a course sampler that you don't have to register for or anything, but then a demo that hooks up with GitHub, and you can see the whole table of contents, see some of the videos, and then we've got obviously the whole full-fledged course, and it's over 200 step-by-step videos, sample project, quiz questions. It's really designed to be very engaging and not just one of those things that you kind of put on and leave in the background and forget about and not do anything with. There's also like comment section, a speaker notes section. We've really put a ton of work into making it the best ngUpgrade process resource on the planet, because I really wanted to build a community around this problem so that we can get more and more people talking about this and working through it together. So upgradingangularjs.com, and my contact information is on there, and I would love to have everyone to be one of my students and help me make it even better.
Nice. All right, well, let's go ahead and do some picks. Do you run your own freelance business? Or maybe you're thinking about picking up some business on the side? Well, then you need FreshBooks. FreshBooks is the quickest and easiest way to get invoices out to your clients. It's easy to use. It works anywhere, available from any device, on the desktop, iPhone, iPad, Android, and all of your data is backed up and secure. And it makes it really easy to get organized and get paid. You'll be tracking time, logging expenses, and invoicing your clients in no time. You can also save time billing, freeing up several days per month to focus on the work that you love, and you get paid faster. FreshBooks customers are paid on average 5 days faster because there's a link on the invoice that says pay me now. And it's a great way to grow your business. Plus, FreshBooks is offering a 30-day trial. That's right, 30-day trial if you try them out. So go to gofreshbooks.com/devchat and enter devchat in the How Did You Hear About Us section. Once again, for a 30-day trial, go to gofreshbooks.com/devchat and enter devchat in the How Did You Hear About Us section. Well, I'll go ahead and jump in with a pick really quickly. So I've been playing this game on my phone. Phones are so freaking addictive. It's ridiculous. But anyway, it's called Star Realms, and it's a card game. And so I've been playing a card game on my phone. Go figure. But basically, you build a fleet, or you build the deck. It's a deck building game, but your deck is your fleet, and then you try and take out the life points of your opponent. Is essentially how it's played. And I've really been enjoying it, really liking it. So I'm going to pick that. And And yeah, I'm not going to get too much more creative than that on my picks. John, are you there?
Yes, I'm right here. Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Yay.
Do you have some picks for us?
I do. Big pick is the hackathons that my team is starting to run. These free hackathons we're doing at ngConf is the first one we'll do it at, and hopefully we'll do it at some other ones down the road. So if you see that there's a hackathon called ngAI, that's what we're hosting. It's for artificial intelligence. Basically, there's a lot of cool ways you can do AI directly from Angular using Azure, which is who I work for at Microsoft. So pretty cool. Hopefully you get a lot of people there at ngConf doing it. And if you see it at one of the conferences you're going to be at this year, please take a look and give it a shot. It's free.
Nice. You going to do one at Microsoft Build?
No, we're not doing a hackathon there for it specifically, but we're going to be doing it at a React conference, a Vue conference, and a Node conference, and an Angular conferences this year. So we're going to give it a shot at all the different JavaScript ones.
Awesome. Well, hopefully we'll see you at some of the ones that I wind up at then too. Sam, do you have some picks for us?
Yeah, I've got three for you. The first, since we're talking about meetups, one of the coolest meetups I've ever been to is here in Portland. It's called Donut.js, and it's kind of a new model for doing meetups. And so for folks out there who are trying to start a new meetup, I want to link to that, because basically what they do is they charge a small ticket fee, but they have sponsors for the meetup that then any sort of cost of the ticket gets donated to a nonprofit. It's really, really cool. And that ticket price, what that does is sort of ensure attendance. So the meetup is set up with 3 to 4 lightning talks. One or two will be a passion talk. 1 or 2 might be a creative talk, and then some deep technical talks. And so every meetup is really fun, very exciting. Money goes to nonprofits, very welcoming. It's the most diverse meetup I've ever been to. It's sort of my pinnacle for what I want to make Angular Portland someday, if I can get there. So definitely check out Donut.js as an example of a really, really cool new meetup structure, and it'll get some money donated to nonprofits as well. The other pick I had was Glitch. I hear a ton about Glitch in the non-Angular world, but I never hear anybody in the Angular world talk about Glitch, and it's so cool. It's like an online app builder that there's art, and I mean, it's so crazy. You just have to check it out for yourself. It's so much fun. And then lastly, I'm also a writer, and I've been reading this book lately called Bird by Bird by Anne Lamott that has been really interesting. It's her book on writing and how to write better. And I know a lot of people out there in the tech world are also writers, either through technical blogging or otherwise. And so I just wanted to make that recommendation. Bird by Bird by Anne Lamott.
Nice. Yeah, we did an episode on Glitch on JavaScript Jabber. So
nice. Yeah,
they can check that out. I can't remember what they called it before. They've changed the name on it like 3 or 4 times, but
oh yeah, it's by Fog Creek. I don't know if it was before.
But yeah, I'll find the episode and see if we can get it on there, because I don't even remember if it was called Glitch when we talked to him about it. How awesome is that? But anyway, yeah. Well, Sam, if people want to see what you're working on these days, is there a place they can follow you? Blog, Twitter, GitHub?
Yeah, I'm just Sam Julien everywhere. So at Sam Julien on Twitter. I've also got a Twitter account and a Medium account for the course that's just at Upgrading AJS. I'm also doing some guest writing for Scotch.io, and that's also just at Sam Julien. So we'll have those links in there. Yeah, follow me, say hi to me. I'll also be at ngConf, and I'll also be, I think this is public now, I'll be speaking at Angular Mix in Orlando now that John's, but so you can find me at both of those and come say hi.
Awesome. You may want to spell Julien, because I know I would never guess how to spell it.
Oh yeah, it's this weird immigration last name. It's Julien, but it's pronounced Julien. Like, don't Julien on the table. I don't know. My dad always said that growing up, and he's such a dad. But yeah.
Just wait. Someday you'll have kids and you'll...
I know. I'll be saying that same thing.
I know. I have so turned into my dad. But anyway. All right. Well, thank you for coming, Sam.
Oh, thank you so much for having me, Chuck. It's really fun. It's such an honor.
Yeah, we'll see you in a couple weeks at ngConf.
Yeah, I'll see you there.
All right. Bandwidth for this segment is provided by CacheFly, the world's fastest CDN. Deliver your content fast with CacheFly. Visit CACHEFLY.com to learn more.